So we're looking at high probability moves. High probability. Yeah, that's good. Did it go high enough? I don't know. Man, GME just tearing it up. That's good though, it went up. Happy to see that. Yeah, great. Push that limit. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfection. Perfect. Good morning. Maybe I should change the name of the stream so it's not so... It's like one of those rockets that pops in the air and then comes back down. It's not quite as simple as... Oh, it's just going to take off and keep going. But we're going to get one decent move here. We're definitely going to get one good move this year. And it's about to happen. So you guys are like, this year? Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think the next big move would be till like summer next year. But I do believe that the move here could be substantial for AMC. Very excited about the possibilities here. Very, very excited. In fact, I'm so excited that I'm going to be, as best I can, trying to get into some good positions over the next few days, because we're really close to earnings, and I'm not really expecting it to drastically change much between now and then. So it'll be a good time for me to start shopping, basically. I'm pretty stoked. So I'm going to be a bit back and forth today, because I have to get some things settled with what I've elected to purchase. So I'm thinking about MPW, and I don't know. I think I might take a chance and just roll them out too. So it's going to be a bit of an on-off day for me. Yeah. I believe in it. I do, but I got to be just kind of as straightforward as I can with MPW. And I think there's just a strong enough chance that it won't go and it will come back down all the same here. Like it could pop. And I'm starting to see a pattern of this kind of across the market with the smaller caps, is like a move into December here. So like we're getting a little early pop here in October, or late October, right? But like I think a lot of it's going to depend on what happens right here. It's going to be a big deal. And then I think you're going to get a big pop, run up pretty fast. I've got this sort of coming up into December around the 13th or 14th, but AMC was starting to look like the same way. It had like a run up likely into maybe late November, early December, which it doesn't sound awesome, but it's actually a pretty simple setup. And I think that on the whole, the work we did yesterday, you know me, I tend to feign ignorance about certain things, and then I go crazy, and then I end up thinking I'm like 100% right about something, you know. But I really did work hard on developing a comparison model to what we see in the build out that happened in March. And the reason that's important is because the setup is similar enough and noteworthy so that it's noteworthy. It doesn't have to be one-to-one in terms of how the end result happens. And this is kind of where we got stuck yesterday. It was like, well, there was really clear evidence it could go up to the 8s. P&F goes up way higher. I don't necessarily think it matters that much. Most people, if you're doing it right, you should have profit in the 8s if you're going to play it at all, and any kind of upside. I'm a little confused as to why someone would be extremely bearish right now, because the only reason that you would be really bearish at this moment is because it was red for a while, or if you think that this is going to come up and like hook. The only place it might get stuck, maybe, is this region right here around the round 5. And I don't particularly see that happening, but that's the only place I can imagine getting severely stuck. Everything else definitely is pointing towards this top that we've been talking about for a while. And I can't even, like, I don't know. I can't even fake that reality at this point. I haven't been this bullish in a little while. We've been really sitting on our haunches, not doing a whole lot. And I kind of like, really since July, it's been sort of like a meh, you know, like every single time we've come up, it's not really been in the right time, and there's no advancement. There's not really any other place to go here unless you just head fake and then drop. So I feel really good about it. I do. And that might be a little naive, I guess, but I'm really looking forward to this. So I'm excited. And yeah, I don't know, man. MPW is just one of those things that, like, it doesn't have to be the same. And I think there's a part of me that wants it to be the same because it's easier for me to understand. Like, oh, if it's the same, it does this and then comes back down into like May or whatever, and everything runs in May. But, you know, if it does what AMC's doing and it pumps and then drops, pumps into like December and then drops, rounds out into mid-December and then comes down, I don't feel like that would be unusual. It just kind of makes sense to me. The wave here hasn't been checked again, and I believe in this wave. I know this is a little strange, but I really think this is right. And if it's not right, it's really close to being right. And what this would imply is that you may not get back above. It's very possible that we don't get back above $8 on MPW till way later, like next summer, you know. And that's kind of what I was seeing on AMC. It's maybe a strange similarity, but one of the things that I was doing was trying to map out. I'll do the best I can to keep this a little bit brief, but one of the things I was doing, and I don't think I did this on stream, by the way. If you guys are like, well, you've already talked about all this stuff. No, not really. There was a methodology that I didn't employ on stream, which was using a wave here, like where you break down up at 14 and then coming back up, and like where that actually goes. It's a really good, I want to say I did it on this chart, but I don't know. I have like way too many charts. Some of them are the same, like they have the same things on them, and then others don't. Yeah, this is the one I did it on. So what I did is I went back and I looked at, we don't have to keep this up here right now. I'm going to get rid of that. One of the things I did is I looked at, this is a little longer term, but like it matters, right? Because if long term you think that you're going to run up, you're not going to be up above 14s or whatever until late next summer, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, it would be like summer into late summer. It doesn't really matter what happens now that much. You know, there could be either a pop to 13 or a pop to 9, and then you're going to come down and go back and test lows at 2s and 3s, and then you're going to go up and break out. We found a lot of continuity yesterday in the, I say quote unquote, because it's not really brand new, but there was a lot of new stuff to it, I guess. And what I was really looking at was timing here. It kind of looks confusing, but these are equal times here to here and then here to here. And there's certain things about that matter, but these are estimated timings. And so I looked at the wave as it presented itself back in 2020, and there's a really, really tight, cohesive May to May structure here, May to May to May. It's really interesting because if you look at it from year over year to the May coordinates, there's a very, 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 very tight symmetry back here in 2020. Why am I talking about 2020? This is not what's happening now. Well, it kind of is. I mean, like, there's still a lot of similarity, and we talked about this marker right here as being highly significant. I don't want to underplay it. You know, when we talk about these things, it's like there is a great deal of significance in the markers that we're setting up under, and like how we see this on the big picture right now. And there's a extremely cohesive, like, tight structure here that's very, very effective. And I think what maybe mars it is my inability to make these charts easier to read. Because you guys are like, well, maybe I agree if I could see it. Well, the issue is that these are like 50-50 moves. So it's like, I really want to show that and demonstrate that and see that 50%. And then it's interesting because there's actually a 50-50 within that 50-50 that's a little more narrow here. And that's in equal parts as well. I might be able to get rid of something like that. But the suggestion is that, like, if you can measure that 50-50 and you get it right, then you're in a position of strength, presumably, year over year, because you have an idea of, like, well, it could take a lot longer, right? And that changes the things. If there's people that are like, hey, AMC's going to lift off, right? That's what your title is. Yeah. So you're saying it's going to pop and then come back down. Well, yeah, but I've been saying that for the whole, this whole time since May. I mean, you're so convinced it's going to happen, Booksy. You might be wrong and then wasted all this time on one idea. But it's just the nature of it, right? I don't see us progressing high to the upside just yet. That's me. That's not everybody, but that's what I see. It's like, not going to go up there yet. I think we're going to come back down and check the bottom. I also don't see us dropping off the face of the earth right now. I think we need to go up before we can come back down so that we can then go back up. And when you look at the big picture, there's a lot of reasons why I think that, but there's a lot of cohesion, again, in the nature of this setup. And I probably don't need every one of these trajectory lines on the face of the planet, so I can get rid of some of these. But I have a really good feeling about the setup as it stands right now. So there's a continuity in this pattern here in the terms of, like, how it could traverse the bottom, really similar in regards to how it's moving through these stages. And ultimately, what we're experiencing is that same hit on that same middle, that we hit back in 2020 right here in September. We didn't do it in September, and that doesn't really matter too much. But when we pumped up the first time, we actually went high enough to hit that. And then we talked yesterday about how if you didn't get to the creek now, if you didn't get to the 13s now, and didn't hit that outer creek, which is possible, that's not out of the question. If you didn't do that now, when would you potentially do that? And we worked out quite a bit on stream yesterday, pumping iron, working out. It's a weird turn of phrase, right? Working out stuff. Anyways, we worked it out a lot yesterday, and there was a lot of possibility for maybe not going all the way down, because if you don't go all the way up, the 50-50, the turnaround from the high liquidity here shelf really only takes you down to maybe 350 to 3s, right above where that gap is, maybe, again, 299s or whatever. If you go high, the 50-50 takes you down pretty low. And so there's a continuity in some regards to, like, how that might move in the middle, but, like, otherwise it's really just a difference of highs versus lows. and you can kind of see it clearly. And I could make it simpler than I did, but I needed to see like where would those crosses be? How would you interpret that visually? Like what would be happening in terms of the higher highs here, the higher lows, the cross, like where would it need to happen? It would be right here, right around 5, but also around that downtrend. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that went into it in terms of the analysis yesterday. Timing is always something that's a little suspect, but like when it came down to it, there really wasn't a lot of space for like negotiation in terms of the timing of the later move. It doesn't seem to matter how I do it. If this pushes up and then comes back low, it's going to probably take till next summer. So yeah, I find it to be a bit one note, but there's not much else to it. It doesn't seem to matter how I measure it, how I build it out. It's almost always the same, which is, sometime next year. I think this might be the fastest that I have it, which is like if it hit lows in like February or something, and then it could potentially just rise after that. I think at one point I tried to squeeze it in for a January move. It would just require it move very, very fast. We'll find out. But on average, the most common setup here, these actually ended up being almost the same. And I made these on completely different days with completely different setup patterns, like measuring wise. So they're almost identical, which is kind of funny, but kind of annoying too, because you're like, well, I mean, what's the deal? Are they really structuring it in a way that you're probably going to year over year be in the same spot? And I think that's probably the case here. Is like, I didn't even do that on purpose here yesterday either, but like March to March, I think you're looking at being in the same place, and I think all of this has been a way of navigating through these, through this year, essentially trading low, trading high, trading down, trading up, trading down, in order to kind of keep it sort of stagnated, kind of boring. And that's very typical for any kind of a bottom or a top. Sideways is sideways, right? And in the grand scheme of things, I can't quite put my finger on a better setup. I've tried doing like the insta move kind of stuff, like straight up kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's possible. But in order for it to happen, you'd have to have a breach of 14s like now. So I suppose if it broke above 14s now and it held and it started ramping up again, I might be like, oh, okay, I guess we're just going to go. But there's nothing else here that really tells me that that's what would happen. Like the move up here is a really strong reaction. The fact that we've built out a really strong support here could be very positive. I get the feeling like a very like simplistic view of trading would benefit some people here, in that like, oh, if you push up, you made a higher high, you push resistance. That's what you talk about, Booksy, right? You came up and you checked those levels and you pushed it, and then when you came back down, you held above, right, the previous floor. That's true, but there's some levels that like we just never really checked, and that's why I'm like, oh, well, I think almost all of these are going to be checked, at some point, coming down. Really talking about 350, 312, and 297. The bottom doesn't necessarily have to be checked, but if you're going to go down to trade low, then they might as well just go for the spring if they can do it. And I've heard people ask me a couple of different ways, how in the world could it go from something like 13 down to 2? The answer is selling. If you own the majority of shares and you can instigate sell-offs and open millions of short positions, all you have to do is outweigh demand. And, that at times might be very difficult to do But when you have the majority of shares, you're controlling the price movement, and you have the ability to kind of put millions and billions into trades. I mean, you can do that. So the idea of like an operator bringing it up to 8s or bringing it up to 13s and then selling it back down while retail is FOMOing here is not at all confusing to me. It makes perfect sense. If the desire is to go low, but we really don't have enough sellers here to drop the price, then we're going to accumulate for months, right? Which is what you've done. You're going to bring it up to some price and then sell again. If the desire is to continue to mark it up, then you bring it up high enough and then you hold it up high enough. And you have to do it in a way that, for us, we would have to look and see like they're not selling off, you know. And like one of the things that is very different about a top, right, versus like a continuation, it's a good time to talk about it because we're kind of talking about like the next couple weeks here. I mean, it could be the next month that we're starting to experience stuff like this, and you're wondering, is it going to stop here? Is it going to stop here? I mean, the big difference is pretty straightforward. It's just a volume thing. So when you have like a high volume push, if there's a high volume reaction on the opposite side, like a seller's reaction, so this is like the good volume, what would happen is that your ramp, and I'll spread it out a bit, make it a little easier to understand, is your ramp doesn't go up like horizontally like and then die. So you don't want volume that looks like I'm going to make it like red. You don't want volume that looks like this. Okay, that's not good. If volume on the move that's paired with it looks like this, that's typically bad. And usually what we see is that volume is paired with like a really high volume sell-off, so it might even stay a little elevated for a minute. Like that's not good. And then if it comes back retraces more than 50%, that's usually kind of a weakness sign, and it definitely shouldn't retrace beneath creeks or other levels. So like you would see some kind of a breakdown or whatever, and you'd have high volume, and then you probably get another high volume spike here is usually what happens. You get another like high volume spike here on the breakdown, right? And that's kind of what we see on like the seller's game, because what they're doing is they're buying or they're selling, and you're getting this high volume and you think it's all buying. Really they're just selling into retail as far as they can, and then it capitulates, right? Sellers are finally outweighing. So it's like you've got 1 million people buying, right? But you got like 2 million people selling. Well, at first it's going to look like you've got 2 million volume or something ridiculous or whatever it is. You know, it's going to look like you have a lot of volume going up as they're all selling. Once that million is met, then it's like there's not really a wall anymore. It's sort of Red Rover, I guess. You guys ever play that game? Until you kind of run across and hit the other side or whatever until you break the line. Once the line's broken, then it's usually pretty bad. So like, what does good volume look like? Well, good volume, I know it's kind of weird, but it's a little bit of the opposite. It's not exactly like parabolic, but usually you have pretty decent volume into the top. The volume might come down a little bit as it's rising, and that's okay. But higher volume on the bottom, like more buyers on the bottom, people are buying. And in this case, the buying is kind of weakening. So sometimes, I guess what we usually see is that there's a little more of like a bump early on, like a high volume bump early on. And then like it kind of drops off a little as it gets towards the top or levels off. And then as it comes down, it pretty quickly returns to, like there's not that much selling volume. So volume kind of comes back to average. And I'm a little off with there because it should be like right here. You have a higher volume and then it kind of dies off and then comes back down. And then when you get the retracement, it's weak. So the retracement comes back and it holds, and you start making higher lows. And that's kind of it. Like that's kind of the main difference between the two. I mean, they look similar in terms of price action. They may look almost the same, but it's very different in terms of that ramp, right? And I know I didn't use this as a cheat sheet, but you can kind of see it as a cheat sheet right here, this is the ramp volume that kind of like comes out of nowhere and then just sort of immediately spikes and then dies, and then it spikes again in the secondary kind of sell off for that whole climax. And it's doing that while holding up pretty well. It's kind of a mix of the two, but it looks a lot more like this, right? So I've had people tell me that this was like a huge buy-in, and that cannot be 100% true. Like I had someone say that this was all buying, like it's all accumulation. You look at the indicators, all buying, all accumulation. Well, there was a lot. Don't want to sugarcoat that and say like, or throw that out the window, right? It's not all one or the other. There was definitely a lot of buying because we saw a lot of the 13F filings from like institutions in May, and there was a huge amount of accumulation that was done. However, if it was all buying, then it would not have stopped. Like it would have come up and just kept going, right? So somebody, a pretty large party, equally sold it down, and the buyers may have been predominantly here, the institutional buyers, right in this first buy-in, and then the rest of this was like retail. And so I think this is like your institutional buy-in, and then I think this is the rest of this was probably all retail buying and FOMOing, and the institutions were starting to sell. Maybe people who bought lower could start selling. Also, you have to take into consideration the shorts that may have been covering here, which means that the volume may not even be 100% just buyers, like normal buyers who are just wanting to own the stock. And maybe people who are buying back shares from way back here when they open short positions at $6, you know, and now they're kind of come back up and cover, right? This is kind of split into two parts because that's like the halfway point. So I really think that institutional traders were already selling, and we're really relying on shorts covering here, and then also retail shorts and maybe some institutional shorts, though there weren't that many back here that were obvious, that were reported. I'm sure there was a lot. And then I think the rest of that is just distribution, you know. And although it didn't come down and immediately make a new low, which is important, it held. That is where you get this kind of idea that, oh, this is pretty strong, you know. It held up. Now, from that point forward, the rest is kind of history, right? We're kind of back to this place of like, oh, okay, so what are we doing then, you know? Well, we're probably going to head back up and attempt to come back up if we can, right, to meet the major wave, right? All the buying that happened in here to come back up was, you know, and then diverted. And we did this yesterday. We talked about GME and how there's a pattern in the way that this hike diverts when it's going up. There's a directional trend here that's fairly straightforward, and then it goes the other way, right? And that's the slingshot method that I talk about, which is like if you have a trajectory and it breaks down, if it can cross the creek low, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, as in like a phase B bottom, and it does provide support, which I wasn't expecting it to, but it did, then you have that bullish breakout, right? So I knew it was possible. I talked about coming up to like $22 in that video on Monday or whenever I posted it. But I was thinking that it had already broken through that ice, so it may not go back up. And then it just reversed, so I was wrong. But that's okay, you know. I'm not bearish on it. I was still bullish on it. I just thought we'd come down here or even lower before going up. So at this point, it's like this kind of model of build out is very, very useful, I think, to understand like the actions that may take place now, because not only did you have this, remember this is iterative, right? So not only do you have this guy, but you've got a number of them, really. Now they're slightly different maybe in angle, but like they're all there, you know. Like this is another diversion, like it went down instead of up. Then it went down instead of up. I mean, every time it did this, you're really getting a very similar build out in terms of direction. So as you move forward, I know a lot of this stuff is like outdated because I haven't really messed with the GME chart timing in a while. But as you move forward, like these are the levels that I'm looking at. Now to some degree, you might say, well, maybe that was already met because it diverted here and then came back up and met it. Yeah, but this is still a trajectory marker. Like it came back up and met that same trajectory and it failed, right? And technically we did the same thing right here on the micro. We dropped and then came back up and failed. So we've done this like multiple times, right? Same thing right here. You kind of came back up. You tried, right? You kind of failed to get there. This is part of the reason why, it's not the only reason why, but it's part of the reason why I have a really strong sense of correctness, that's the lack of a better word, about like something like this blue line coming up, because these are markers that would indicate lost trends, and like on a wave down where you're kind of depressing, you're going to pump back up. You should go and meet those marks, meet your markers, like meet your makers. You should go back up and meet those at some point in the future if it's bullish. And so we're at that point now where it's like, yeah, if it can make those advances in the right places going into mid to late November, you should be pushing up pretty concisely to these pocket regions up here. I marked them off a while ago. And this is annoying because really we've had a lot of this stuff on in our scopes, if you will, for quite some time. Like we've been talking about some of these targets up high since we first pushed up. And I think that's important to realize that that's a big part of this, is like, yes, that's totally true. It's not always been like the most reliable, right? In terms of like the way that I describe the chart, there's been some moments of like, well, it didn't go, so now what, Well, the thing about that is that like iterations, which is just this idea of like copying and pasting, is really reflective of just thinking about it as terms of like, this is the way the market is trading. If it trades it on a large scale and then it starts trading it smaller and smaller and smaller, that's a compression. That's a method of exhausting a trading pattern, exhausting like a methodology. If I'm able to do the same thing over and over and over again and continue to accumulate or whatever, I'm probably going to do it if I'm an institution until I can't do it anymore, right? Till like it doesn't make financial sense to do it anymore. And then I might not do it. Then I'll be like, all right, it's time to go. That's the idea of exhaustion or whatever. And in the meantime, you have all these other kind of tells about maybe direction and whatnot. And we're seeing those things and we're like, well, it's not following through, or it's not doing this, or it's not doing that. And of course, you can pay attention short term to help with the setup and building out, what may happen if it breaks here, what may happen if it breaks down here. And we did that on all these tops, and for the most part, I think I got all these tops right. Except maybe this one and this one I was a little optimistic about. On the September one coming after the FOMC rate cut, I was kind of optimistic it might go here. Sometimes about 60% of the wedge would be here. You get that turnaround. So I was optimistic here it might go. I felt like this was a top and this was a top when we came up. I didn't think it was going to go as low back then, but here I definitely thought it was going to drop because just again, the way that the RSI and volume set up. You did the same thing here as you did here. I have it still on the chart. There's been indications of problems before they've happened. So we've been doing that short term, okay? But like long term, I don't think that continuity goes away. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the saying goes. You keep what's good. You don't keep what's not. And ultimately, it may not be that it wasn't good, not to try to defend myself, but it could just be that the timing's not right, like the operator's not done, and that's why you wait for confirmation. Like, timing's probably the hardest thing in the market. So why do you think that you have it right now then, Booksy? Because where we are in this particular place and time, it's meeting criteria that it needs to meet, like when it needs to meet it, which is really nice. So we talk about confirmation. I've been talking about confirmation a lot. And one of the things that I had marked off, and I don't know where it is now, probably on another chart, was right here. Where was the stronger confirmation needing to be? And then what would we maybe expect out of earnings and elections? Somewhere up here. Could it run up before? Yes. Will it run up before? I don't know. Some people are going to say, no, it's not going to move until earnings. Fine. Some people say, oh, I think it might have a run up into earnings. We've done that before. We've run up and then dropped and then run again. It's like there's a number of ways that we've kind of approached earnings. Don't let anyone convince you that earnings is like a one-note thing for AMC. It is not. It's like always a little different. But we've definitely had run-ups into earnings. We've had run-downs into earnings. We've had sideways action into earnings. The only thing that is true about earnings is that you typically get some kind of a mass reaction pivot, and then it decides the direction it's going to go. Like, it's almost always the case. There's some big flush, and then it goes the way it's going to go. So we had talked yesterday about the need to push up and hopefully get above 470, because this needs to start going parabolic. And so the stronger confirmation here was what? Well, it pushes above 440 and holds it. So did it do that? Yes. Are there buy-ins here? Probably. There's a decent amount of selling happening. Try to get back below 440, but now that it's above it, it pushed. And then what's cool is that when we were doing the chart yesterday, we did the comparison to March. And it's pretty much become one-to-one at this point with what was happening in March, which is kind of incredible. And the big thing that we wanted to look at was the breakout here. And I got rid of that line a few minutes ago because it was huge on the chart. But that's the big one, right? And like, what's kind of amazing is this is one of the few charts I remember. I don't have that many charts that I remember. You might think I have like an iron mind or something, a safe. I don't really remember every chart, but I do remember this one because it was a really good one. Because I remember when we did it, I did an arc pattern, and every one of those jumps was part of that arc pattern, and it broke out like exactly where it should have, and all this other junk, and I was like really happy because I learned something new about like this idea of like pulling away and then coming back up, yada yada yada. All right. At the time, I wasn't really using waveforms correctly. I was doing weird stuff with the waves. I had like arcs that didn't make sense. They were kind of arbitrary and weird. But anywho, I digress. So what needs to happen here is very simple. It needs to push above this yellow marker. And what happened in March, again, it looks sort of identical. It's not one-to-one perfectly, but it's really, really similar. And that is the build out. Where does it go after it pushes up here and it comes back down to a pretty particular level that was like one of the final anchor points? It's the same thing as saying we needed an inverted head and shoulder here, which we talked about previously. I think on this chart I talked about, might set up a little like an inverted head and shoulder. There's simpler ways of looking at it. It could be slightly angled. So we talked about, well, maybe it could come down low here. And if it doesn't, then you'd want to see it push up and then come back. Well, now I have a little more exact numbers. Previously, I wasn't really, aside from maybe coming back to 430s or 424 or something like that, didn't have like super strong exact numbers here. But now I think I got it, and I think it's 444. So I'm looking for that push, hopefully above 472 before we distribute, because that would be a little bit more one-to-one with what we want to have happen in terms of like a push-up and a pullback. It's always good in my mind if when you advance beyond, just a bit beyond, you push the resistance a little bit on the reversal. I mean, you push the resistance of the previous top that you sold off from. We talked about that yesterday. You want to see an advancement, and then when it retreats, makes a higher low. So this has been a bit janky because there's been some early dips, I think, but overall it's looking really, really good. And I had for a little while I had drawn out that little accumulation model, but the rising accumulation, the main thing to remember about that, and it's kind of simple, is that the rising accumulation does advance, and there's like heavy buying, and then the selling could be like equal parts, but it doesn't retreat all the way. And that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing like an immediate retreat to the bottom where it's selling down and they're having to hold it up. It's like floating, right? Now, some people are going to look at this and say it's a bear flag. I totally get it. It has the appearance of that. The difference is that when it does the rising accumulation, almost always without fail, what ends up happening is that it breaks the top. And I think it's testing it right now. But almost always what happens is that it breaks out like it's going to run off the top. So we're at that point right here. And then when it does that, it fails. So it's like a head fake. It should do like a cat ear. So if you want to see it more like exact, I will doodle it for you as best I can. It should look like a pretty traditional like distributive cat ear where it pushes up and it should make a little sign of weakness, and then it'll have like maybe a last minute like head fake over here, right? And then it's going to drop. This is actually the first place, maybe be like right here, okay? Possibly. Now you guys are like, well, it needs to go to 450 by Friday, so make it smaller, do the work. I'm not I'm not concerned about that. So you see a pop, and then what would happen is it would retreat, and then after it retreats, so I can make it a little more exact if I'll do my best. Maybe I need to be on like a 2 hour just to give me a little more wiggle room with these lines, because they snap to the bars, so it's hard to make it on a 4 hour. You can't really flesh it out. So you would have it be like, oh, maybe it's going to go. Now, do I think it's going to sit still on Thursday? I don't know. That seems like a lot. Maybe it has that move up and comes back down today, and then tomorrow does it again, and it kind of fails. I don't really know how fast it's going to go. But I would say that on the whole, what you would expect, actually, you know what? I think this moved on a Tuesday. The Monday was the pop. But now I'm thinking about it. I remember, like I said, I don't remember a whole lot of charts, but I vaguely remember the timing of it, because I remember on Tuesday it like closed. It started turning. So what happened was, like, I guess I could try to do it day by day. Let me see if I can do that. Let me see if that makes sense. Better sense than what I'm doing right now. It's kind of confusing. I know, this is like dangerous because you're like, well, this is a little too precise, right? Maybe a little bit. Wednesday, Thursday. Oops. Maybe it just says screw Max Payne. That'd be nice. And get the Max Payne people off my back. I mean, that looks pretty good to me, too. I like that little ramp at the end. It's nice. A little pop in volume. So I guess if it doesn't break, maybe that could change some things, because I really wanted to push higher here. I wanted to come up to like 470 or 1 or 472. And then I wanted to kind of come down, show weakness. So maybe that's all today. Like we end the day kind of where we are right now, like 460. We get like a pump, and then we kind of come back down, presumably. Or we get a ramp up that looks like it's going to go. And we get a sell down. So this is like where it shows like weakness. So if it pumps up to 472 and it comes back beneath this trend at 463, my estimation would be that's probably the weakness showing. Like it's going to come back again, try the top, but it won't go all the way. It probably only go to the whatever the top of this is, 468. Because you'd push through you'd have sellers take it down too far, and then they'd come back up to test that liquidity that they left behind. They didn't check it, and then they'll drop it here and hook beneath the trend. So this could very well be like one of those things where you don't really get much of a move until Friday. If you really wanted to get Max Payne, you could do this, and that would actually work pretty well. And then Monday, it does like a shallow S-curve kind of thing. And then Tuesday, it looks bad, but it starts taking off. And I think a lot of folks maybe doubt that because of they're like, well, it's not, doesn't make sense for it to, sorry, I messed that up, to go until Wednesday. But again, it could be either or. I'm not really partial to one or the other. But here's what I'm thinking, because I remember when this went up Monday and came back down. And then on Tuesday, specifically, it started to run. But it started to run this Tuesday back in March. It started to run in like the middle of the day. It was a really strange day. Normally, I'm not a big fan of any kind of like big breakouts happening end of day or whatever. But that's kind of the way it was back in March. Like it hit a bottom and then it just started taking off. It pushed higher on like that Tuesday. So it went into like a little shallow S-curve thing. And then it started to, so this is probably going to be more like this. Like that, going into Monday. And then it started coming low, but there was a bottom that was hit, almost like a double bottom, and it would be 444. And on that Tuesday, it started to run up, and it had already like broken back out before Wednesday. I mean, you can see clearly like the close here was really high. It was a big move. Let me see if I can get a little bit. You guys are like, why don't you just look at it, Booksy? You're staring at the chart. I don't think I can get kind of nitty gritty enough to show everything that I would like to show. I might still have this chart somewhere if we really wanted to like dive into comparison, but I was trying to make a point that it moved like, yeah, it's a little confusing, but it actually had already moved back up. So it had already like broken out by Tuesday. This one makes it look like the Monday. It went down. So Friday was here. Monday it popped. Then it came all the way back down. And then it actually recovered. So, I mean, it's possible I could do all that on Monday. It's just a simple shift. Or, because I mean, that again, that was a big double flush. Or this all goes a lot faster. And by Thursday, maybe it's already broken down. So maybe we get that head fake today, and then, yeah, it breaks down Thursday, and it goes ahead and hooks pretty early in the day. Usually this is more of like a suspenseful thing, but it could be very like boring. Maybe that just gives them some more leg room Friday to come sideways. But if that's what happens, then Monday might just be like go, because I think once you make that move Monday into Tuesday, it's hard to time this stuff. There were other things that I used though to time it, so maybe we can do that too. So I'm already kind of did the helicopter view already, but there were a lot of other things that I did here. Man, I really should probably find that chart, huh? There were a lot of other things that I did, so I'm trying to think. Maybe there's a way I can do this. One would be this. This should break down because it's a wedge. And when it breaks down, because the end of the parabola should have kind of a wedging thing that kind of goes outside the wedge to the upside. Yeah, and then this is where it volleys right here. So it could be as early as Tuesday. It's very possible. You might already be up. I know I've been kind of back and forth about it, but you may already be up here before earnings. It could be very fast. Like genuinely, it could be that fast, because if it holds max pain, that's fine. It's whatever. You know, max pain might drastically change going into next week. If it's like 5 right now or 450 right now or something, by next week, if it starts moving Monday or Tuesday, it'll shift high or whatever if people start shifting their positions around. One logical place to be might be right here at 525. That could be a logical place to be at earnings, like right there. That's one possibility. Like we're already running up, and then earnings dumps the stock back down a bit, and then it runs up again the next day. That kind of stuff happens a lot on AMC. It seems very likely. So this would continue that run up. So what else can I use? Well, there should be a trajectory here that I can use. That just looks like the same thing that I already have. Yeah. Probably. That looks right. It's really anybody's guess if it's below here or not. I don't really care. There's too many like places it could be. So, of course, if they really wanted to hold it another week, could they keep it at like 460 until the following week? Maybe. Maybe. I don't really want to see it reject here, but if you wanted to do that, I guess you could. If they wanted to kind of come back and touch the creek again, that's a possibility. You're like really kind of clamp it down. What else do I got? Let's check this one. It's probably like the same or similar. That's just pointing towards the run up here. That's already got tons of stuff, so that's redundant. I don't need that. Also pointing towards the run up there. It's like the same spot. It's strange, isn't it? Right there. So those are no different. Those are all the same. What about, I'm looking specifically at double tops and double bottoms. Those are easy ones to grab. You can also look at low and the breakdown point. That also tends to be important. This one, kind of the same story. It looks like, yeah, I mean, it kind of just looks like an earnings, maybe a run up and a drop here. And then later it does the same thing. It's like back over here, you know, for support. Now, you might question this because you might say, well, that's just not really a trend. It's like 2 points, you know. It's not, but you got to remember, like every time that the buyers or sellers make a stopping point, there's a presumed trend there, and it could become a creek that's really important. Typically, the bigger, the better, right? These obviously eventually do form, but it always starts with just a couple marks, you know. Every trend does. So there's a sense in which, yeah, that might be a little over the top, but I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that weird. I really don't. So yeah, and then I think what else we want to do is look at maybe this guy and bring it over here. Okay, and then let's bring it up higher. Let's see if it makes any sense from the bottom. Oh, it kind of does. So what this is this is looking at the middle of the bigger wave. So every M has two shapes. There's like the every M is just a wave, right? So there's the wave 1. That's where it's higher, and then it makes 2 extreme lows on either end. So it's pushing down here, and it's pushing down here. So these are like the low points, and it usually stays kind of elevated in the middle where it's distributing. Even if it's going upward, which this one is, you can see it stays higher in the middle than these 2 lows. They doesn't connect, right? If you connect this point to this point, this doesn't touch that bottom. That's normal. But then there's usually like another one, right? And again, if it's kind of regular, it might come slightly higher than this, but then it usually comes back down. And that's because it's going back to check, you know, this wave cross here. And then this is kind of the last place that you might get a low. So this is like the last pullback. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because sometimes, it's not a sometimes thing, and I can't say it all the time. Sometimes it does matter because where these first 2 are, because there have been a couple times where it's been pretty close to where it ends up being in the end. It just depends on if it levels out and makes sense. This one, maybe not as much because of the rise here. So when it's parabolic, it changes the nature of it. It doesn't quite look like that, right? Because when it goes parabolic and it's kind of like rising, you get the M shapes all the same. One way to do it would be to generate it, you know, with like arcs, almost like you would a beak, and then just kind of, again, to illustrate the point, not anything else, but just to show you like what I'm talking about. Like this would be an example of one that's maybe more parabolic, which is kind of like what we're seeing, right? So you'd get a move up here, it should come up high, and then this was like the big push. And when this distributes, it comes back down. That's like the M at the end. So I think I said this a couple different times, but like there's no magic formula to the sequences in the market. Like this is pretty much it. So there's another possibility here that is interesting, but I don't want it to be like the big one, I guess, is that if you look at the jumps here, one might say that that's it, like that's the end of the lower part. The other possibility is that, again, just depends, is that this is part of a larger sequence, but that's always like an annoying kind of possibility. Because like technically a wave bottom could be just as long as a wave top. When it's accumulative, the bottoms tend to not be very long. As you guys know, they tend to be very pointed, and it's hard to identify them. But we had an instance like that on AMC recently, which is back here. These were bottom. This was a wave bottom. But it doesn't look like one because the tops came almost all the way back, if not to the tops. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but this is really the wave. We've broken it down every way we possibly can. This is the middle, which means this is the low. But it has such violent reactions when it hits those lows that it's kind of just resuscitating it back to right where it was, almost slightly lower. And that was that iterative drop model kind of thing. Well, sometimes I suppose, and I made this pretty small because I don't want it to be like in the way, but sometimes you might look at this and say, well, the bottom can be just as long as the top in that wave, and that's a little more regular. So if you did something like that, and the bottom is more like the top, what that means, usually what I'm doing when I see something like that is I'm looking at this. I'm looking at that jump right there. Like that's how I know where the bottom is. Like it should break whatever trend existed here will break, right? And then you'll have the lows on the wave as it turns, and it has to cross the creek. Otherwise, it could just capitulate. And do what? We already know this. Every M could become an S-curve, right? And that's the same thing going down. Like if this failed to advance, then this could become like an S-curve, right, to the downside, and then you have like a breakdown. So it's the same idea. I've got it on a rise here, but you get my point. So that you get this rise, and then typically this comes a little bit higher than maybe the parallel here. It might push a little bit. The way that I'm doing this is a little odd, but this is where the secondary creek comes into play, this guy. Because this is the one that usually is met if there's a breakdown. And then in addition to that, it's oftentimes a important level like that. Do you see how that all kind of worked together? So this makes perfect sense because this is basically a resistance shove right here. Then it's coming low. This is like a dip for liquidity, but there's like support built right there. And then this is coming back up. You're jumping over the creek. You're retesting levels, and then you're finding support. Sometimes that support is also like a pretty concise level, right? Like that. This is almost like too ideal, but this would be like an ideal way of building it. And then this is a rise that again pushes it. You can see the push right there, and then it retreats one more time. Finds that as a support instead of like a weakness right here. Like it kind of went through it. Now it finds it as support. And you've jumped the creek, right? And then you get the advancement here. And this is kind of like the best buy-in opportunity usually after this, because that's where you get like the biggest possible run in this sequence is usually right off the edge going into the next top. Then you push high, and in order to come through here, you have to eventually come back. And usually, again, it's like I'm kind of staring this, laddering it. Usually there's an advancement, and then it comes back low. It looks like it's going to fail maybe or fall through. And this is, again, very regular sine wave. But it's essentially the same thing all over again, you know, basically. If the sequence is strong and this is part of a larger sequence, then this is where you can have, like if this is part of a larger wave, so if this is like the small part of a big wave, then you could have like a big major reaction back out, right? It depends on what happened on the other side. And that, again, that would be like equal parts. Like, oh, it could go back up about the same amount. Usually there's, again, trajectories in play. This one usually is very important right here. So this is essentially like that master fractal that we build. And so that one would be like, oh, it could go there, right? That's the way I would build this, you know, typically. This is a really strong like bottom that's making higher lows that looks like a bear flag, but it's not. And a lot of it will depend on this final push down. So there is a slight chance that when you look at something like this, that this could be just a bottom that's got strong reactions and that we haven't even made the top M. So like there is a possibility, like I'm a little off. I think that based on where we are, because we've approached this edge, I don't think I'm wrong about it, or at the very least, it doesn't matter. Like if this is the middle M, it still plays out basically the same. If that makes sense. Because like if this is 1, 2, and this is the jump, and then you push, well, that's still like the second side. And if it's like this, like who cares? Okay, that's the middle, so what? There's gonna be another 1, 2? Well, yeah, it could still be exactly like what we said. It still needs to jump here. So you're probably gonna see it there. And if it were not that way and it were even larger, again, it's like, it doesn't really matter. Like if this were the 1, right? And then this were the 2. Okay, well, do we have more to go? If that's just the bottom, if the bottom's like elevated that much, which again, I don't really necessarily agree with. But if the bottom were elevated that much, do we really have, what else do we talk about? And there's nothing to talk about. You would have like a 1, 2, and you just place it over here. Because again, it doesn't really matter. What matters is not like the A, B, C, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G kind of garbage. What matters is like top wave, bottom wave, top wave, bottom wave. Like at the end of the day, if this wave breaks high and goes way high, well, okay, so what? You know, like you could come way back down. Like the wave now is huge, you know, and you could have a really long retracement. You know, and you can use those trajectories that are built to help guide you, but it's not like these kind of things, but it's not perfect, you know, and sometimes I get it really right. Sometimes I get it kind of wrong. So, yeah. So anyway, I'm like feeling pretty good about, so I'm going to look at this first M. I'm going to look at the cat ear right here. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to just add some more marks. I'm going to delete some stuff because I think some of these aren't very important. It's really for me as like a guidance measure. And then if I think it's really important, I'll leave it on the chart. I'm going to try to keep this one clean. So these are just guidance to help remind us that, like, yeah, we need to see it hold creeks, you know. It's a reminder that, oh, if it comes down, like, you want it to hold here. You know, this could be a potential low. If it dropped, and that's what we were saying on the first chart we made, was like it come down to like 430. It's pretty much the same thing. I think it's going to be 444, but we'll see. And then the major kind of downward trend hasn't been breached. We took a long detour. We're building back up. We need to jump it. I think that should be fairly self-explanatory. You know, like if you look at this as a simple wave, up, down, up, it's kind of obvious now as a flag. You're like, well, if it goes down, it goes down really far, right? It could go all the way back down to the bottom. Sure, that's possible. But as a simple wave, right, that makes sense. But at the same time, it's like now you have a really simple way of understanding where it needs to go here. Very simple, right? And then you're basically pushing all the way back up to the ice levels and through those. So you're going pretty far on the whole. I think that makes it simpler. So if you want to look at that as like a channel, you can. I don't care. I think it's fine. My point is that those trajectories that are built into it can be used. And I think that what we want to do is, yeah, really focus on the ones that seem the strongest to us. This one's really pretty good. Bottom, and then it drops through, and then top when it drops. This one's pretty good. Again, bottoms to drops, double bottoms, things like that. That one's pretty solid, actually. I like that one a lot more than the other because it looks like it has a lot of interaction with it right here. It's not perfect, but it's okay. And I did this one, but I didn't do the other one going up here, so whatever. Anywho, so this is a possibility as well, that this could be hit later on a trajectory mark. Would make sense to me. So it's, again, it's kind of pointing towards the same top. A little bit redundant, maybe 46 degrees, 41 degrees. We could try 46 because sometimes there's a higher trend established. So if this ends up becoming like a higher trend for some reason, you'd have a marker for that. I would imagine you would go from here, though, not here. You'd go from this move across. Maybe. Yeah, it looks like a pretty decent channel setup regardless. So I'm feeling like there's a decent amount of consistency here. Like everything's kind of lining up where it needs to, which is good. And it definitely seems like this is a hot zone, this is a hot zone. So if we're looking at this as like an M, this could be like that final 1, 2 here. Jump, jump. Okay, back in March, there wasn't as much of that because I think when it made the jump, it just kind of advanced pretty quick, but there was a small push. So you can't see it right there, but there was it was kind of like a double bounce. There was like a high push, and then there was like another low jump here, like locally, and then it went. And what it was that it was like a creek jump over the main thing, the main jump, and then it did a little creek jump here over like the short term. This was kind of boring. It was a very classic looking Wyckoff reaccumulation where it has like a long creek, but it stays high. So like you could imagine something like that. Again, maybe like here, if it's going to hold for whatever reason, it pumps up only at earnings and then it's going to hold that, but it's not going to advance yet. You could imagine this maybe going into like Monday or something, you know. I could see that as a possibility that it like floats till the next week, you know. But anywho, you're like, What needs to happen, Booksy? All we need to see is we need to see above. Don't technically need to see 472. I just marked it off because I think that's where it's going to go. We need to see 471, maybe 472, but we really just need to see above 468. If it hit 469, I'd probably be fine with that too. Ideally, it hits both. It pushes above, it pushes above the top and then hits that mark and then comes down. And then for GME, I don't know, man. I feel like it's the same. It's like it's done the extension. It actually went kind of early and it pushed high. I'm really excited about this extension, guys. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. The fact that it made a higher high here, because it's either a distributive top and it's going to break down and go down forever, or it's just changed direction. You go down forever. You guys are like, what? Meaning go down beyond the lows here. Or it's just changed direction. And it did it jumping over a creek. So it made a higher high here. I think we talked about this in relationship to what happened back in May, just to give us a comparison. But this is what we're talking about right here. It made the higher push. And then it came really far down back in May because it went to go check that creek. And then it took off. So yeah, we basically have the same thing. And notice how I have an option where it comes down really low and it's kind of like a bummer. Basically it comes down to this top, but it's sort of back where this broke out and generated support early on. So there's a couple possibilities for GME if you were waiting on GME analysis. One is maybe this pocket right here or even down to the gap fill. Would be reasonable, I think. That's possible if you're looking at November or something, or maybe even faster, This is a really fast up, so it could come down pretty quick. The trajectory of the ups and downs does matter, so 81 degrees. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just noteworthy, so that's why I note it. So this would come down really quick, in theory. So there's that. And then there's a support around, and this is kind of in my opinion, I think this is more likely if it's strong. If we don't care about the gap, I almost feel like 2174 is a stronger bottom, because if we ignore that gap and it doesn't come all the way back, it makes more sense to me, I guess, is the best way to put it. I don't think that it necessarily makes a lot of sense to go back through there unless the gap, if for whatever reason, is just super important. I feel like that's one of those situations where it could be left alone until later on. I do think it's very possible it comes back through here, but this is how I'd imagine it going. Is it creates a bottom here, maybe not that fast, but it goes pretty quick, and then it bounces out, and then it hits a low here, perhaps something like that. So it generates a cross, but does it with a mild breakdown of this other trend. It's that green marker, something like that. This isn't really a very important trend, but it did take off from that point after hitting the low, so I'm going to keep it. It may be significant. Can't get them all. If it gets them all, it'd have to come all the way crashing down to 2143 here at this intersection. That's very, very fast. That'd be by tomorrow, which seems ridiculous. But then again, who knows? That's a really steep move up. So if we go back and we look at the May one just a minute ago, this is actually April. The steep move up wasn't met by the exact same trajectory down. It's a little different, but it is fast. 73. Yeah, it kind of abandons it here and goes sideways, but it starts with about the same speed. I would be willing to bet if you took this and didn't put it towards the top, but instead use like the bottom trajectory or something like this one, it's a little more mild. It'd probably work better. 56. Yeah, like that's a little stronger in terms of like direction. It's just a waveform guess. It doesn't really have to be perfect. It's just a way of understanding roughly like how quickly it could move. It does follow it almost like religiously at first, but then it goes away from it. So maybe we can do something like that here since that's too steep. I can't really work with it. It doesn't look right. Let's not use that bottom. Let's use the top trend here. That one's stronger. So that's 66. Oh, oops, I'm going to have to remeasure it. 65. 65. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe at first it goes down pretty fast here. There's a gap, so it could drop it and then start going down. But then it probably goes away from that pretty early and starts going out more sideways, you know. And we'll see. So more of like a shallow S-curve that bounces versus like a M-cross that goes down. I don't know about the timing of that. Why am I not just having GME go straight up, you might ask? Well, it's not that it can't. It could. If volume ramps and it continues to ramp, maybe it could. Right now, I was a little hesitant to enjoy this move because it didn't have great volume coming up. It was really kind of pales in comparison to some other breakouts. It did jump the creek. I just felt like quote-unquote smart money would probably wait for that confirmation and then buy it up. So there's plenty of time between now and elections, like, to do something like that. That's why I think it's reasonable to think that this comes back and checks it and then goes. It also makes more sense of the wave because if this is the lower wave, this would be like a 1, 2, 3, which I think is right. 1, 2, yeah. It should come back adequately in about the same amount of time. This is complicated, but it would be like right here. So that would be the end of the wave. Because this is the, another way of understanding it is this is the bottom, and then this is a wave top. So this is the breakout. See that right here? So this is all part of like a bottom, and then this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is like a bottom here. So it's basically 1, 2, and then 3, 4, and then 5, 6. Pretty large. Easier to see it maybe on RSI. It's going sideways. It's maybe a little simpler. You can see the wave is very evident here, right? Now you might say, well, these two should be attached. Well, they are, but again, it doesn't really matter. They're all attached, right? So when you go through that motion, it's easier to see this if this is the bottom. On price action, there's a huge amount of push up on RSI on the 30-minute here, so it's a little off. But then the rest of this should be like the remaining section. And this is usually pretty accurate if, and this part might be a little confusing, but this is usually pretty accurate if you can do it right. Like this ends up being about, maybe about as far as, yeah, you would maybe expect it to go, and then potentially have a retracement. Adding more stuff to your chart, Booksy. Not a good look for you. So it could stay elevated, I guess. Maybe it stays elevated because of AMC earnings, you know? Maybe. I don't know. This is a... I don't know if it really matters, though, either. That's the other thing. Is it may not matter very much in the end. I think this is where it's going to gather the most resistance. So maybe there's a delay here. So it's a little like more regular. So the first drop, if it drops decently severe, it would be whenever this trend breaks. I'm glad we pushed over that. We're not seeing it yet on AMC. We need to get a little farther, but we're moving. Really exciting stuff. So I think we need to see that breakdown. It's ugly. We're actually pretty close to it. We're not that far off. I hate to say it because it might sound really bearish, but if it could be a situation here where we end up like generating like a hook underneath, and it would look bad, but I think it'd be okay. So what this should be similar to in some regards would be see, this is Wednesday, which is AMC earnings. I don't know. I mean, it looks like AMC earnings. That's the 50-50 here. So take it as you will. But it seems like there's a pretty straightforward like M shape here going across. I mean, it could go farther, I guess. You know, those are things that we can worry about later. But like, I mean, it could go beyond there and just keep going till earnings, or not earnings, or elections, but it's fairly concise. We'll see. I'm guessing that on the hourly it's not as bad, and it's still divergent here. It's just very parabolic looking, so like this one is not as steep. This is like the same, basically the same token. These two, this is steeper and steeper and steeper. So the good news is you're getting like a ramp like no other, which is awesome. And we don't do that unless we're getting ready to like either pop or drop. So it is good news. What I mean is that if you go back and you look historically at these moves, they tend to be very easy, I guess, to spot the acceleration in. So you see like there's a kind of more mild approach here, and then it's getting a little more accelerated, especially this top versus this top. Now this one's really compressed and like straight up. It's interesting. Something else. Yeah. I did this on AMC a while back. We looked at trajectories leading up to big runs, and it's pretty fun to do, but you basically find that there's an acceleration or a ramp in trajectory as it's breaking out like that, which makes sense. It's nothing like profound. It's just what was interesting was that sometimes those ramps end up giving you a picture or window into where you might end up being at that particular time. Like this is one that's going across the middle. I find that one to be kind of compelling. I don't think I'm going to find that here, though I guess I could try. I think it would be a bit challenging maybe there. Maybe this is up high. You know, I keep kind of bouncing back and forth between the two, but it might be very possible that this ends up going down quickly and coming back up. Maybe we were talking about something similar on AMC, maybe coming back up and then coming back down really rapidly. I mean, this is a big double flush. Pump up high, then come back down, and then all that's within a couple days. And be in a position to run, and then potentially go back up. So if the wave just has like a simple whip around here, I think it's got to come back to 444. if it has a simple whip around here, it may break out before Wednesday. And I'm starting to see like a similar idea here. Maybe there's a support built earlier, you know. So if we bring it down into Friday, it could be very rapid. See, right now, I'm not convinced it's going to continue. If it does, fine, but maybe above 25 at the farthest, and then I think it would have to come back. But I think that the idea of it coming back down into Friday is really compelling to me. Like by Friday being back down, you make the highs you need to make midweek, and you take it down for a couple days. Sentiment goes soft again. People start moaning and saying this thing's never going to run. Always the same, right? Yeah, and then maybe Friday, we were kind of mentioning this before, maybe Friday is kind of flat or something around some really generic level like 2250 or whatever. And then Monday continues the downtrend at first, and then it reverses very quickly. So it hits wherever it's going to hit by Tuesday, turns around. I don't know. Why not just wait, though? Why not just wait till Wednesday? I guess you could. So there's definitely a more modest approach to this. I'm trying to like kind of cram it in because I think Monday is your hot day. It'd be easier to take it up Monday. But I guess there's an approach that this could come down slower Wednesday, and then you get some after hours movement. If it's just a really slow, methodical move after Friday, it doesn't really make sense to me on the current chart, but because of timing and stuff, it just looks wrong. Like a pre-earnings run up or a pre-earnings breakout even almost makes more sense right now. So if this wave is correct, it might be. It jumped the creek here. That's the same thing. Still looks like it could be Wednesday. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe, here's a thought. Maybe it doesn't go to 450. Maybe it's way above 450. It's in like 460s on Friday. It takes a longer time to distribute up top. And then Monday it comes down. Tuesday it bottoms. Wednesday it reverses. Because maybe that puts a lot of stuff in the money. It could be interesting. All right, I haven't looked at chat in a while. I told you guys that I'm on like a slightly different setup. So like my my system is a little different. So if you guys are like, what the heck are you talking about, dude? Is it going to go or not? Well, so, I mean, the reason I'm like not looking at, if you guys are talking to me and I'm not talking to you, it's because I have to switch back and forth. I don't have my other screen up, which is usually how I have it. So I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm ignoring people. I'm really not. Really very excited about this setup. And I know that I'm being very nitpicky. Some people always like to critique whenever I'm being nitpicky, they always like to critique about time frame. Usually those people just aren't here very often, so they don't know that I spent like all yesterday talking about no short-term stuff, really. It was just long-term, big picture stuff. If that's you and you're like, man, I don't know about all this, you're way too close, you know, you got to zoom out. Just know that you're right. You need to zoom out. But at the same time, you're not right. Like I already have zoomed out. I've been doing nothing but macro charts for a little while. So I really haven't looked at much of this price action at all until today. This is the most detailed I've gotten. So if you're of the mindset that, you know, it's too close, what about the big picture? Big picture here is very straightforward. This is like almost cookie cutter setup right now with an iteration movement down after making a middle in the wave here. It changed direction back in August, made a move down. You guys are like, no, it didn't. It was already going down. It's meaning like it hit that final wave and then it broke here. So this was holding. And then it came down in a very iterative fashion, low. And then this is a potential buy-in. I've been talking about something called an ascended accumulation. The reason that I looked at March is because we had something very, very similar in March. And effectively generated like a slingshot. So if this manages to hold, and I think it will, and specifically, I would like for it to come above 472 if possible. Just a quick spike would do it. Above 468, excuse me. Quick spike would do it. 1 penny is enough, right? If it can come above 468 and then come back down and meet 444, and I'm fairly confident about that number, y'all. I think that's going to be like a big go sign. If it approaches it tepidly, I'm very excited. So if it like gets down to that level and it starts kind of like chewing it up, going into a bottom at like something like this, and it starts doing something like this where it rounds off coming down into 444, I'm going to watch really carefully. And if we see it like kind of work out and start checking those other levels that it's been testing, that to me is like a big deal. That kind of bottom is what I want to see right on 444. Doesn't guarantee anything. It just is a very like very, very concisely, like that's what I would love to see when we come back down. And I'm saying when, because I'm very confident that that's what we're probably going to do. I don't think we're going to take off. There's enough space here that you could potentially wait till earnings. I don't know why I do this to myself. I try to like time it out perfectly and all this stuff. It doesn't matter that much. So what I had on the chart here before was, again, probably pretty accurate, right? And that is that you want to see that move, and it could easily be parsed out into earnings. Like that's what I'm trying to demonstrate right now is like, yes, I have it in a very particular way, but certainly like just even this looks right. The reason was like, I'm not sure about Monday, Friday, you know, being at a particular place or Monday being at a particular place, but certainly like that looks right to me. And if it does that, that's what I want to visually, that's what I want to see. So there's other options if it moves early. You might say like, after that, what? You know, like what happens after that? Well, you get the run up. You know, ultimately, before too long, you're going to come back up and recapture this trend. This is like the last steepest trend on the parabola before it comes across and then breaks. You should come back up and recapture that pretty quickly. I'm not positive about this happening all next week. So like there's a lot going on next week with elections. I cannot tell you that it's going to come up and capture this for sure or be up here or whatever. That's not possible. I just can't do it. It's way too much pressure to predict something like that. But come Monday, you know who the president is or whatever. Yeah, maybe presumably it immediately comes up, it breaks out, and it goes. You know, the rest of this is fairly straightforward. We need to see a leap back up here to 6. We did the measurement. I think 618 is what it hits. I'm not one to kind of give numbers like that unless I'm feeling pretty good about them. And even if they're wrong, like I still felt good about it. Like I'll give you a number if I think it's right. So if I think that number is right, that's what I'm going to stick with. I think it's 618, and I think it's based on this 444 in the middle being 524. So you should see like a whip around here. Really, it's like everything kind of works out very well here. If you look at where these intersect that region right here in this pocket, this is like a key zone. There's so much going on there. Long term, like really long term, that is the green marker that we've been using on these parallels, and they go way back to really this breakout that happened in August of 2020. They also go to the breakout that happened in January of 2021. So it's a very significant series of parallels because these are the ones that I've kind of been building my chart around. So if you're wondering like, where'd that one come from? Well, that's where it came from. Well, guess what? Where that is right now, right? If you look at where this is in relation to everything else, notice that when after the run up in June of 2020, when it came back down, it kind of parks beneath it till it breaks it again and it interacts with it that way, right? That's exactly what's happened here. It pushed up and then it like parked beneath it. Well, how do you know those parallels are right? Because they are. How can you be sure about that? I am. I'm not sure about a lot of things in the market. I'll be like, maybe, blah, blah, blah. I'm 1,000% sure about these parallels because they gap up at the same mark. They hit the bottom at the same mark. These bottom parallels matter for that reason. They go back to historic moments like the beginning of the stock and these earliest trends that are developed. They are absolutely 100% the correct parallel lines in terms of a gigantic trend, right? And so everything about the chart from this point forward works in that way. When I did the analysis yesterday, we did it maybe a couple different ways. But we looked at some of those parallels. We didn't look at all of them. There was another one that I had done, and I don't know if it's this guy. This one's kind of messy. This is not the one. This is the one that had the PNF stuff with it. Oh, what the heck? Where is it? Bucksy doesn't know where his charts are at. Total amateur move. Yeah, I don't know which one it is because I'm not seeing it. Maybe it's this one. What the heck? It's the one that had like the different colors in the middle. This is the one. Okay, so these are the same parallels, the same group of parallels. I just moved them around a bit. This is orange, green, whatever. We can make them all green if it makes sense. Doesn't really matter to me. I just made parallels. I marked them differently so I could see like that's the green top versus the orange top. And then I went looking at this locally, like that green top is where we broke down in September. And yeah, and plunged beneath everything. We did the same thing back here, same at the green, right? So this other one is also really important, really vital. And I was going to show you that before I copied and pasted it over here because it's equally important in some ways parallel. There's the one right there, which you can see goes back to the big jump and the breakdown that happened in February, and then the big jump and the retest 2021. There's just no and then the gap way back here on the LSPY back in 2017. Like there's no place that these are not hyper significant. So if anyone had any doubt about what parallels to use, don't. Very simply, just draw the bottoms to the original opening price roughly. But really it's just these two bottoms, and then you can draw those parallels. Super simple, okay? You guys are like, well, yeah, duh. Just go from one low to the next low. Yep, pretty much. It is that simple, okay? But there's some other significance in this marker, and I had observed it for a little while and looked at which one I really cared more about. It's a weird one because it seemed to play a lot into what happened back in their very first breakdown in 2016 and 2017. And it doesn't seem very important past there. It kind of looks like, it's weird. It almost looks like this is distributing along top of it. like anytime it's coming above it, but you can't really ignore like everything else going on the other direction and horizontally. It just doesn't seem very important again until like as a super strong marker, right? Like, oh, we need to advance against this until here. And then all of a sudden it's defined as like a top to beat. And when we break out, the gap up that happened in January 2021 gaps right up above that parallel right there. And when we come back down, look at the interaction right here around that parallel. So like there's a huge amount of importance that you can place on that particular region right here, and then this particular section as a, maybe the best way to describe it would be like as a kind of a creek, that like a resistance that's not being budged very much, is trying to, and then it retreats. And this is very similar to what we're talking about. We talk about the retreating and then coming back up. I don't know how else to describe it, but like this is very similar to what we see all across the market. Anytime you have these slingshots, you get that advancement. This looks almost the same, right? You see that advancement against it, and then it goes away from it. So you're like advancing, you're trying to push it, and then eventually you come back out, you test it, you break out, right, after you cross it. And then fascinatingly, this is where we get this interesting kind of connection to like, oh, well, then we end up coming back up and meeting these trends again later. Where did that come from? You know, well, I would say originally, like, this is kind of the first place I ever sort of noticed it in the market. And it honestly made me question the whole of the 2021 thing, because it's like, well, is this really random? I mean, is it, you know, is it random? Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think it was. And it bothers me to some degree, but in other ways I'm like, I don't really care that much. I mean, if it's not random and it's quote unquote manipulated, as people like to say, then it's predictable. Like there's things that you can predict, right, in the nature of how that moves. So this is a really similar build out, because we went away from, we kind of pushed towards something, we retreated, right? We've anchored ourselves a couple different times. And actually, let me do it again. As you can see this mode, like, oh, we're going to try to go back up, and we hit this resistance, and we're like, nope. So we come back down. And as we walk down here in these little LSPYs, we generate these two hooks. And we push really far away from those trends. And then we come back up. We test one. We test two. And then look at the push out here, right? And ultimately, yeah, this goes up really high, but it comes back and checks both of these, right, before taking back off. So you can see then the interaction in that little alleyway, this little alleyway fights, scrapes, scrappers, scrapping it up right there. You can see those marks, check, 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 right? Well, it would be one thing if it like only happened there, right? It's just like, oh, it only happened there. It never happened anywhere else. But that's not true. This happens all over the market. And so when I look at that, I can't help but find those similarities to those patterns here. Like, look at the breakdown. So let me go back here. Look at the checks that were made here and here along those two green markers, right? So right there. Here, I'm going to make this huge, like yellow. Right there, and then like right here. Okay? And then look at what happens when we come down. Right there, and right here. If there's any doubt in your mind, let it be doubt no more. This is a very, very clear setup. Now, here's where things get a little bit muddy. If there was 100% clarity about some things, about everything, I guess there wouldn't be much for me to do. But this is where things, perhaps, we could argue, may get a little bit muddy. And that is, this is where all this nonsense comes from. When we came up in this big run-up here, we actually pushed through both. And there's another question in my mind about this guy, and I don't want to get into that too much. because there's parallels that go up as well, and they meet up here, and so therefore it should be going up to like 13, blah, 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 blah. In terms of the 2020 structure, it should be going to 13, right? If we were just looking at the lower structure by itself, like, okay, let's pretend like these parallels don't exist. We just look at this lower structure. I did that analysis already. It should be going to 13 right now. Like, that's where it would go if it's proportionally 1-to-1. Trust me, I've got a drawing minor. I know proportions. I'm good at it, okay? But like, it's not just that, right? So if you just looked at that, you'd be kind of misled into thinking that has to happen or something. The other thing that's interesting here is what happens, like, I guess at this particular angle right there, and this is what gets me kind of like, one part it gets me like excited, and another part it makes me kind of nervous, because there's a secondary series of parallels that exist, right, that is also being tested, and it's generating kind of an upward motion. It does, I think, date back to this area right here, and it can kind of be used throughout. Like, you can see, like, when it jumps over, ultimately this series of parallels ends up being really important, and it's used all throughout this bottom as well. So I had done another chart based on this a while back, and it was an interesting one because it definitely plays out like, oh, there's a structure here that's kind of rising, and then these play out as like sign of weakness, spring, push, you know, almost like you're taking it in 3D and like pushing it back in space, like stretching it. But that same set of parallels is being used right now. So I'm kind of like, oh, that's interesting, you know. So we've got those green guys, they're anchoring, and then in addition to that, you also have, you guys, I can't see anything though, Booksy. I know. But you also have these like blue guys, right? And this is part of the reason why I'm like, oh, well, we may get that sign of weakness for the gap fill, just like they did in 2020, and then drop low. May not go all the way down. Again, it could be just like this, where it kind of goes slightly low and then comes back up and gets above it again and goes. But suffice to say, like, it's there. And you guys are like, well, that's imaginary stuff. That's not there. No, it's there. Like, we're doing it right now. We're interacting right now. If you look at the same set of parallels, we're interacting with the top back here. And it's pretty fascinating, because if you draw them out as you would, you can start seeing like how neatly tied up all this is, like very tidy. Like, look at the interaction right there. Check out this guy right here, like on the rise right there, where the hits the bottom and then hooks through the top, and then look where we dropped off from. Yeah, there's a little bit of lack of maybe some structure at the bottom, but this is what got me up top, was I applied it backwards farther to like the earliest kind of breakdowns, and I applied it here, and these ones really got me like, oh, okay, this is still being used right there, this guy as like a wall, and then this one in particular really hit me hard. I was like, well, that's undeniable. It's the same angle. And then this guy is also like the same angle right here. So when you look at this from that point of view, it's like, well, where the heck is this going? You know, like, what's the ultimate goal here? And what we can tell, all we can really tell, is that these approach this last bottom, and that this ends up being kind of the funnel later for where you come back. Like, it's an anchor for where you come back later. Here. Obviously, is that exactly true? No, I mean, there's other stuff going on, but like, it's a triangulation. So that's a triangulation of like this trajectory here, this channel here, going to meet this range over here, right? Well, that all kind of adds up okay, but then when you look at this from that point of view, it's like, well, where's the next top supposed to be? I mean, is it supposed to be way up here or what? And this is where I got kind of like lost in the weeds. When I did this before, I just was like stuck. There was no easy answer. It's evident that it's there, but aside from like this middle, which is where I was estimating around the 13s, and then that idea of triangulation later on, there's not really much else to say, you know? So what we ended up with was a couple different options. One was 884, one was 13. So if you want to know like where is it going to go, the 13s has been on the chart for a long time for me. It was higher at one point, it's come down. We have enough cause right now to go to like 16 or 17, easy. You might be thinking like, well, why don't we just do that? We could push all the way up here to 16. We might, you know, we may push up to 16 or 17. I don't know for sure. However, the comparison to the build out that happened back here, which is a very similar comparison but not exactly the same, this comparison uses a different methodology, which I've been calling like slingshot. It's just my word for it, and it has to do with the build out, how far it goes here to here to here, and it's just like a 50-50 swing. And it doesn't suggest that you would get up to 13s. It only suggests you get to 884, which is undeniably like a supply-demand level. And we did technically distribute right here among it, and we didn't really sell off very much. So it'd be very reasonable to think that this could have like a double top where the second top doesn't come as high, you know, and it just kind of tops off and then heads back down and finishes like a cat ear kind of thing or whatever. And that makes me wonder, because I had a lot of strong feelings that it was going to go beyond that, and then like it was going to come way up here to like 13 or 16s. But now I'm like, I don't know. It took a really long time to walk down, and they built up more cause, but it doesn't really look like you need to advance beyond the green mark. Because if you go up to 13s and 16s, and this is maybe where people are like, ooh, so we're going to break out early. Yeah, if you were going to break out early, if you could come up to 13 to 16s and jump this creek, the big one coming down here, right, the cat ear creek, if you could come up there and jump that creek, sure, you could advance. And I said that before, like if you were looking at how do you know you're going to go, or if you're going? Yeah, if it came up to like 14s and 15s and it held, it's possible it could go. The issue is that technically lines up with the blue. So it's possible that it's just almost stretched, right? The other thing is that it could technically push this resistance in an effort to kind of say, yeah, we're going to go over that, but still distribute, come back and get liquidity and then jump it later. That happens all the time in the market. The other issue is that if you look at the green markers, they did not take off beyond that top, and you really stayed below, right, until it was time to like break out. So some folks are probably going to look at this and be like, well, maybe it's going down already, Booksy, because it did this, right? Maybe it's going down already because they're going to just like take off and just jump it and come above. Maybe. But there's still a lot left on the table down here. Like there's a huge amount of liquidity that wasn't really gathered. And it would concern me that you would do that and just leave it. And there's no adequate second down move. There's no real phase B besides like this chop here. I don't know, man. Other folks, maybe you're going to look at that and say, I think it's a head and shoulder, inverted head and shoulder. So if it can break out, it's going to just fly, you know, moonshot or whatever. That one might be relevant right now, this little blue guy. I don't know, man. I think the problem is that I don't see why you would necessarily come above 880s. If that measured out right, and I think it did, then I don't see why you would come above that right now, unless you're ready to go. Like, there's just no need to jump this necessarily. Again, if not for the creek. So there's a lot of options there, like what could happen, what might happen. Certainly, I wouldn't put it past them to like go to like 1380s and then do some kind of weird, you know, distribution and come down. I mean, it doesn't have to be like that, but I certainly wouldn't put it past them, you know. Nor would I suggest that it's not possible that this could actually be like a move up, that then retraces and finds support and continues again. But on the whole, what's made the most sense to me is a double flush, like a 1-2. I think we've got evidence that that would make sense here. And I think that a phase B top would be great. So I'm looking forward to maybe 13, but like I can't make a strong enough case at this time anymore that it should go significantly farther than maybe 890. Even though I'm still bullish, like I'm still really bullish about it. So when I say liftoff, hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I think it's going to go to the moon. I'm saying it's kind of like those toys where you like pump up the rocket and they shoot like 30 yards in the air and then they come down. Again, to come back to check liquidity. But hey, some of you don't care. You're like, I don't care, man. It's better than nothing. Yeah. So right now, I have to say I'm a little disappointed. A little bit disappointed that it didn't come above 471. There's still time in the day, but I really wanted it to push that. You know, it did push this, I guess, on the daily, which is something. Push the marker here. So I guess it technically did a little bit of a head fake. You probably can't see it very easily, but there's a wick and it comes above this trend on the daily. So there's that. Maybe they think that's enough. I don't know. I don't like it. I would rather have gone all the way to the top and pushed above the resistance. Interesting though, because now I'm looking at this parallel and look at where we're kind of getting knocked down underneath that parallel. So maybe that's part of it too. Maybe there's a desire to kind of do a double move here. We're being a little antsy about it. It's interesting how many layers there are in the market. You really can't track everything all at once. I haven't even looked at like some other basic stuff, but isn't that weird how like perfect that is? And that little wick right there correlates to this one back here on October 24th. This is where it touched, and then see how it sold right down after that? Just boop. It's almost like, again, using it like a kickboard. And then the whole thing looks like a M cross through it. It looks like a wave across that. There's the little hook. Looks like a wave across that parallel. And now we've approached it, we push back up, and we retreated right back down to it. So I was saying, like, maybe there's going to be another leg here. Like, it'll hit here and then go again. I mean, I guess that's possible. Maybe it still goes up into Thursday. Maybe it's a later move. I was assuming it was going to be today, but what if it's tomorrow, you know? This backup could be just like a part one attempt to push and then back up, hold the creek, race up again, hold the line. Man, that's super clean. Wow. I just accidentally put that in the right place because I put it way back on the other top. That looks super good right there. This is good though. And then what this tells me is that this is like an interaction of the same kind right here. Not quite a mirror. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but it's a similar interaction. Notice that when this came through, when it came down, it tested here, right? You see that? So it like pushed through it first, then it backs up, finds support, and then this is really the move that takes it through, right? So it's like an effort to like recapture it that's failing, and then it finally like stops. So this is actually the move that goes through it right there. And it's interesting to look at that now in reverse and see the similarity in that first push here and our expectations, right? That we would have like a push up, that we would like push it. And actually, if you're doing it completely in reverse, it would then drop back down now. Maybe it does go low. I don't know, guys. I keep flip-flopping. But you get what I'm saying? Like if it were completely reversed, it would be like this. And then you'd go back and you'd find some kind of bottom. And then you do it again. And then this time there'd be some kind of an attempt to try to get back through it. But then you just break out here. I mean, it looks pretty similar to almost exactly like what we were thinking right here. I think that's incredible. I love that kind of stuff. I mean, just look at the overall picture of it, you know. If you took this and you did the same thing that I just did over there. Isn't that incredible? Like, that's amazing. I was like, you're way too excited about dumb things, Booksy. But that's amazing. That's like this inverted, you know. I think that's incredible. How can you, I don't know how you could not be amazed by it. I mirrored it. It shouldn't be mirrored. Just flip it over. Nope, that's not right. That's not flipped. They got this backwards. They mirror up and down. Yeah. It's the same exact principled thing. Isn't that crazy? What? What? I think it's great. So that's a reflection of manipulation in the market, like the clear and evident desire to kind of control things. Now, if it doesn't go again, maybe we're talking about coming back pretty low. You know, we could be coming back down to that 31. Like we originally kind of thought that was where it might go down. It didn't advance high enough. That may be where it is. This is the stuff I can't really control. I'd love to have it hit the markers I want it to hit. I think the 444 was a really strong place to do that. But certainly, if it backs up, I could see it coming back down to like the 30s here. It would just mean that all that cross would happen lower, which is kind of strange. Like over here. It would happen like around the 4.5s. We need another leg up. Yeah, it's fun, dude. Fun stuff. I could see maybe one more big push. See how the RSI is coming down, but the price action hasn't really completely lost yet? It makes me think that there's going to be one more like shove. Why? Well, we'll see. Actually, now that I said it, as soon as I said it, it went like below. Booksy. So like, if the RSI was already below the trend here, let's say the RSI came down, but the price was still pretty much the same, I would expect the RSI to come back up and retest. So if the price was on the same level here, then I would expect there to be maybe like a secondary up thrust. Does that make sense? So like if it held the same, it'd be something like that. So even though this is technically already broken down, this could have like a last hurrah and generate like an up thrust, like a distributive move. Yeah, but you know, if it's already below, then it could be 1-to-1. So we'll see. And not very helpful, but I was looking at this and it looked like it was already really low. It's not really that far down. So that could be kind of grasping at straws a little, but that could be maybe where you get another push on AMC. It tries to come a little higher. There could be a little more volume injected into AMC to get that pump. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I tell you what, after I get off the stream today, I'm probably going to spend my time working on my portfolio positions. So I told you guys my car was like busted and we had to go get a rental. And it turns out it's like $1,000 repair, which is always fun. I'm pretty annoyed because there's the condenser and the compressor on the air conditioning, and our compressor went out first, like back in June. That was like $1,000, and then the condenser just went out. So I'm like, it sucks because they're charging me again for it, and I know it's not like their fault. They can't control those things necessarily. I could just take it somewhere else, but they're not. I don't think they're hoodwinking me. I mean, it really legitimately was working. The AC was, and then just stopped working again. So like, if it's not the same part, it's not the same part. People say they go out together, so I believe it. Maybe they could have gone out together. I think what I'm irritated about was the labor cost, because if that had happened at the same time, the labor cost would be a lot less since you're taking everything apart. You do it all at once. So I'm pretty annoyed. So it's like altogether, it's costed us quite a bit, and $1,000, man, is a lot. So I'm not happy ever dropping $1,000 on anything really. But this could be very, very well timed if this is what actually happens. You guys are like, so really, Booksy, you're just hoping. This is just hopium so you can pay off a bill. Nah, we've been talking about this long before the. We were talking about this setup long before the air conditioning broke. But it would be nice. It'd be nice to have that provision so I can get that done. So I'll be looking at my positions and see what I want to do. I'm not buying in if it pushes up here. I'm going to wait. But I think that just like what happened last time in May, I don't like to be like that guy that's like too confident, but like this was where we were in May when I bought in, right around the 8th. It was right before the earnings, like a day or two before. 7th and 8th and 9th, I bought most of my positions. And I knew it would probably drop on earnings. And it didn't run on earnings, right? It just dropped and then it just sat there. Because it hadn't come back down yet to test the bottom. But I was really bullish about it. I did not expect there to be like a 2-day, 200, 300% move or whatever. I just thought it was going to go up here over time to like go towards 12 to 14. Which was right. It just was really, really fast, right? So this area where I bought in, I had that same kind of hesitation of like, is it going to be good? You know, are we going to break out? So on and so forth. And we're in a similar situation now. I don't feel particularly bearish right now at all. And I feel pretty good about the setup. I like the way it's set up. I like the similarities to both 2020 and the similarities to 2022 March run. I think that there's just a lot of decent TA here to grab onto, and I'm just waiting for those confirmation markers to hit. If it happens before earnings, it happens before earnings, but I'm feeling really good about it. So I'm going to do my best to sort of start looking at positions again, because I hit it pretty much on the head last time. I was happy with it. And I think somebody recently on the Discord quoted me on it. They went and looked at my charts, and there was a chart back here that showed something like, it was actually way back here. It was like going into April, and it was like something like this. It wasn't quite right. The timing was a little off. So I thought it would like run up above or something into earnings like that or something. I don't know. But it was basically like the exact same thing. And it was great because sometimes you get it right on the head, and that's where you need to be willing to take some risks, because ultimately if you're scared all the time of getting in, you're never going to get in, right? You're not going to make the play. So if it goes down, it goes down, but you have to risk it if you want to see anything. So if you don't play the game, you can't win. You guys are like, not anymore. Participation trophies, man. There are no participation trophies in the market. There are certainly times where you may see the benefits of learning without participating. At the end of the day, if you want to make the money, you have to participate. So, yeah. So I'm going to be strategically kind of looking at what I want to do here, position-wise. And I don't really want to spend any time looking at other things today. I think there's been enough of that done over the last week. You guys have more or less all my opinions about stuff. I gave you levels for things. I did not look at every little thing that every person, requested of me, but I've looked at a lot of other charts, and I've got markers set myself for things that I might want to see move. But ultimately, I can only do so much. I can give you an update on your tickers every now and then. If I'm not invested in them, I'm probably not following them. So it's good for us to do a quick recap every now and then. But on the whole, you're the one that's going to be trading it. I can give you my 10 cents or whatever, 2 cents, and check in with you on and every now and then. But we look at some stuff every day because majority of people want to see that. Majority matters in something like this. So if there's only a couple people and a couple things, I'll look at it. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy to do it. I want to find good trades. But we looked at WTO and TNA, ANH, and we looked at MPW a lot recently. We've been looking at different tickers that mostly small to mid caps. We don't typically do a lot of the big ones on this channel. But I can't do everything, so I gotta go eat lunch, and I'll be clocking out here in a minute. So I don't think I'm gonna be taking requests today. Maybe tomorrow. We'll see if it dies off a little tomorrow. If you are new to the channel, you probably aren't, because most people I think have to subscribe in order to comment, but I do have a Discord group. It's free. You're more than welcome to join. But I have to give you guys my info so you can connect with me, because I don't give out any invites publicly anymore. Too many people just jump on there who don't really need to be on there. So it's easier to kind of have a sort of a narrower window, and people that want to take the effort will get on. We'll give you access. For the YouTube channel, I have started trying to do a little bit more in the way of updates. Updates are hard, man. Sometimes they're really short, 30 minutes, as short as I can make them. Sometimes they're a little longer, 30, 40 minutes. Doesn't really feel very short, does it? But that's a short form video for me. So that's as short as I'm probably ever going to make them. They're hard because I could go through a process of doing the TA and then come to a conclusion like I did this week that there could be a distribution, and there wasn't, at least early in the week. And so it's hard because if you only watch those and you couldn't watch the stream, I think there's a lot missed, and it's hard for me to summarize it. But I will do everything I can to summarize the content that we talk about this week. I'll try my best to summarize it in a short form video this week before earnings. So if you're somebody that just piped on and you're like, oh, I missed it. Well, I'm going to be talking about this the next couple of days, watching it and making sure everything still looks good. But I will do my best to make a short form specifically on AMC and GME before next week. Okay. It's very possible that even if I get, half of it right, and I get the general idea right, that the timing is off too. And those are things that you're just going to have to forgive me about. When it comes to stuff like this, there's just so many ways it can happen. And like I said, there's not a one size fits all for AMC. There isn't a rule that works. I studied AMC for the last 3 years. I've looked at earnings. Every time earnings comes around, I go back and look at earnings. There's not really a pattern that's not already there. It's just it just kind of follows whatever's already being set up. So if the setup is good, earnings tends to be maybe a drop and then we run. But you could already be in a breakout mode That's happened a few times. Or you could be low like we are right now. There's no one size fits all. So I don't have a magic formula to know exactly where it's going to be at what time. So if you're somebody that's like, well, I want to do this or I want to do that. Look, I can't tell you what to buy anyways. So I'm rambling a bit here, but I'm just trying to like cover my bases. I can't tell you what to buy. I'm not a financial advisor. That's just something that YouTube people say all the time. It's not a legal protection thing so much as it is an ethical thing, in my opinion. Like, ethically, you should not be expecting somebody, unless it's like your parent or something, or your brother or sister or somebody that you really trust, to give you financial advice. Like, money is yours. So for someone on the internet to give you financial advice, tell you what to do with your money, is unethical in a lot of ways. And so I'm never going to pretend like that's what I'm trying to do, or give you like exactly what you should or shouldn't do with money. And a lot of people ask me stuff like, is this okay? Is this safe? Is this going to work out? I can tell you what I think if it were me. I can talk in hypothetical. And hypothetically, if I were planning for this event, I would probably be doing a variety of things. Hypothetically, I would hypothetically be doing some stuff that's more in the money. It's a little more expensive, but it's safer. If you want to do options, in the money is a lot safer. You can do it for pretty far out too, and it covers a lot of time. That way, if it doesn't go your way, you don't have to rush to the door to get out. You've got time. Usually you're not going to lose it all like overnight. I would predominantly do that, and then leaps, which are like longer term option contracts. That's all that means. It's just basically something 6 to 9 months out, maybe even longer, a couple years out. They get kind of expensive when you go way out, but that's it. It's risk reward kind of stuff. They're less risky. You don't get quite as much from them, but they will earn if it runs from here to 8 or here to 13, even here to 6. They will gain value. You know what I mean? More value than just trading the shares. Shares is always the safest bet. It's going to have the least amount of volatility in it. Doesn't have to deal with all the Greeks. And if you don't know the Greeks, probably shouldn't trade options anyways. Again, that's my opinion. I personally am not going to be YOLOing in a bunch of short-term, like next week kind of things. Why? Because I don't know, with it being so close to elections, I just don't know how anyone in their right mind could think that they could predict the direction it's going to go in the short term. Meaning, like, yeah, it may go up to 8 or 13, but it's really back to back with the election. And you have to then consider, like, there could be a weird price action between the two. And it's padded on a weekend. So you have next week and the week after. So it's like, there's just a lot going into that. That's a lot of baggage, if you will. So I'm not personally looking for anything, again, my opinion, I'm not hypothetically looking for anything beyond a few weeks out. Like late November kind of stuff. Like, that's probably as close as I possibly will go. And even that, I think, could cut it close, because some of the data suggests late November, some of it suggests mid-December, So at this point, January is really not looking that bad to me. Like, personally, I think it's pretty safe. I'll have to look at the cost. I don't know. I'm also not going to load up, again, hypothetically, I'm not probably, if I'm investing in this whole season, I'm not going to load up on one stock by itself. Like, I'm not going to put all my money on one thing. There's a lot of good plays. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, especially with an election. You're going to have certain industries that react negatively to the candidate that is chosen, right? That is elected. It doesn't matter who wins. There's going to be some that react negatively. That doesn't mean long term that they're going to be bad. It just means that it's a knee-jerk reaction. Oh crap, so-and-so won the election. I got to get out of this stock because they don't support this as much as the other candidate does. It happens every election season. I will say, however, that on the whole, I don't see a lot of problem for small caps. Like from a technical standpoint, small caps look pretty good in terms of their setup. Pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. All right. There's things that could happen, yes, that turn it south, but for the most part, I think they're due for a big push. All right. Now, all that being said, okay, do I post trade information on the Discord group? Yeah. I never tell you guys specifically, I won't tell you specifically what it is how much I'm getting of something. Again, because I don't want people to like mimic me. But what I do is I look at the setups that I want to invest in. I haven't done it in a while because I haven't been investing in a while. If you're wondering like, well, why don't you have stuff posted? I think the last thing I invested in was WTO, and I just bought some shares. Like, that's it. And I've averaged down a little bit, but I also sold some, on a pop. So it's like, there's not much to report there, and anyone's welcome to use that in the Discord group, but I don't tell you like, here, buy this, buy this, buy this. That's not a service that I'm going to ever offer unless I become a certified financial provider, right, or advisor. So I will, though, share with you to some degree maybe what I'm doing in the Discord if you're a part of that, okay, in the days to come. That's it. All right. Well, Roaring Kitty is Roaring Kitty. So, dividends or participation trophies? Yeah, that's funny. I do not link the Discord link, but if you reach out to me on Discord and tell me that you want to join and tell me who you are, then I will let you join. Does that make sense? If you just throw me a message and you don't say anything, I'm probably not going to say anything to you. So I will ignore you. Because there's too many people out there that like, they're trying to get you to join crap and... Okay? I don't like that. I don't like the bot behavior. So if you reach out and you don't say anything to me, I'm probably not going to say anything to you. If you reach out to me and you say, hey, I'm so-and-so from YouTube, I wanted to join the Discord group, I'll try to give you a link. Maybe it's today, maybe it's tomorrow. Yeah, I just shared it. It's just too unsecure. I used to share links on here, but I started getting all kinds of people clicking on it, and there's rules associated with this particular group. It's not like it's not social, but it's as much as it's as close as I think I've ever come to in this particular environment to a very like professional group. There are some people in there that maybe get a little too crazy sometimes or emotional, but the rules are there for the particular purpose of let's keep it non-personal, let's keep it professional, let's just talk about charts and TA. So it's not a very exciting group, which is probably a good thing. I've been part of too many groups that turn into like drama. That's not what I'm looking for in my life anymore. I never really was. But I'm not looking for that in the Discord group. So I do tend to be a loud voice in there because I founded the group and I obviously am one of the larger contributors of the group. There's no rules about who can and can't contribute. Once you've signed up and accepted the rules, you can post charts and stuff. It's just that me and like maybe a handful of other people are kind of the regulars. And that's about it right now. There's no cost associated with it. If you join it, Go to the resources. You can even have some free books. They're ebooks, so if you want to learn some stuff when I'm not streaming, go to look at the ebooks. They're good ones. They're simple. Yep. Sorry about that. Remember, the liftoff that we're talking about is not, sorry about that. I hit the microphone. The liftoff that we're talking about is not necessarily like to the moon kind of stuff just yet. We're getting there. I think we need one more wave. I do. And I think we're going to get there. We're just missing a little bit. We're missing the next creek cross. We're missing the rebound on that. And then I think we're good to go. Approach the top again and go. So it's not the biggest move ever, in my opinion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You guys, if I'm wrong, enjoy it. You know, I will have my shares. I probably won't hold the options, but I'll have my shares. You know, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, then at least I've done my due diligence, and I'm not getting into a situation where I'm FOMOing into a move after the fact. I kind of have an idea of where it might stop. I have an idea of what my plan is, and I need to execute that plan well so that I can earn some income, right? And then that's that. That's trading 101. So when I get to the top, I'm not questioning what am I going to do. I just do it. And by the way, I did the same thing on the run up in May. I didn't question it. As soon as it hit the top, when it got to that opening bell and it hit like $10 or whatever, it wasn't as high as I wanted it to be. I didn't get to trade the after hours. I don't care. I just got out of my options. And I made money. I didn't look back. If it had run up again, maybe I would have been disappointed. But that's not the way I want to trade. You know, I don't want to be like reactionary on everything. I want to have a plan. So I'm going to be much the same this time. I might get out of some stuff early. I've done that before. I think on IWM I got out really early. Not really. I got out at like 218. Ended up running up to like 224 or something. But I made money on it. So again, it wasn't like bad. It just wasn't as good as it could have been. You know? It's like I still had a good profit. That's what I'm going to be aiming for this time. So I mean, I do think these low ball targets are really important. We talk about liftoff. It's not to try to like garner hopium. It's really about understanding like the nature of the move. And it is probably, in my opinion, if I'm right, I don't know if I'm 100% right, like we can't know, but if I am right, then this is the move of the year, because you're not going to necessarily see much until next summer. And that could be it, you know, for AMC trading for me for, you know, the next 5 or 6 months. It is what it is. If AMC only makes big moves every 5 or 6 months like that, then that's when we got to hit it, get ready, go, and then wait for the next one, you know. So I'm of the opinion that we need a wave, and then we need to come back down. And it may look a couple different ways. And I think that GME is kind of the same, but I also think that GME, oh look, I was kind of right about that. It did pop there. But AMC is not really moving up high, so I don't know. I think GME may be largely the same, because you may need to get that advancement, but it's probably not going to be as big as people expect. And then I think it's going to come back down again. And it hasn't yet come back low, but depending on how this goes, it might. Like it might come back to like 12 or 13. Just depending on how this top forms and everything forms on it. I'm cautious about that, saying stuff like that on GME. People get really riled up about it. But it's a delicate balance. Like the way that it sets up now could determine whether it does that dive. And I think it could benefit from the dive. Like it'd be like a double bottom on a major trend. So we'll see. We will. All right, my time is up. My time has come. So I'm going to turn into leaves and float off in the wind. I hope you guys have a good one.